welcome back. Tis the season, as they say. My name is Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Aloud, presented to you here exclusively on the SaltWire Network. We are part of the largest independent news audience online here in Atlantic Canada, and I really do appreciate you taking some time. Find our new YouTube channel, something that we've been working on to help get some of our stories out in front of you. So look and subscribe and do what they ask you to do, and you can find us where podcasts are found. And of course, the news at saltwire.com. And we're in the midst of this time of unprecedented inflation. They're saying not since 40 years have we seen the price of everything increase so drastically. And the other thing that's doing is it's putting a lot of pressure on those agencies that give to others and do support through charitable work. And Bruce McDonald is here to tell us more about Imagine Canada and this recent survey they did. Bruce McDonald, thank you so much for doing this. And where on the planet are you right now?
I'm located in Hamilton, Ontario.
That's where your main office is? Now,
well, we're actually a distributed organization. We have staff all across the country.
Okay, so tell the listeners and the viewers what Imagine Canada is. What is your focus?
Well, we're a national registered charity, and what we seek to do is improve the operating environment in which charities, nonprofits, and social enterprises function so they can serve their communities better.
Now, when we're talking about the impact that inflation is having on charitable services, are we talking across the board? Are we talking about all charitable organizations are potentially looking at less revenue or support this holiday season?
Unfortunately, yes. This is a widespread phenomenon because inflation is affecting Canadian families. And when Canadian families are disrupted in their economic stability and their lifestyle and their livelihoods, there's always a ripple effect to charities and nonprofits.
Looking at the numbers, and this is provided through the survey, and I know that you have had some help in putting this together. It says fewer than half of Canadian adults say they intend to donate, compared to 56% in 2021. How significant is that decrease?
Well, it's a pretty big drop. I mean, normally year over year, we might see a 1 or 2 percentage point swing either way. But I think the other two data points to bring into this, which are really important, is that among those who are planning to donate over the holidays, 38% indicate they're going to give less. So those who are giving are going to give less. And the other part that's important to know is that about 40% of individual giving comes in the last 8 weeks of the year. It truly is the season of giving in this nation.
Okay, so from Giving Tuesday, which is that's born out of an American shopping tradition, but it has been embraced by Canadian charities. So you're saying at the end of the year, that's when most of the money comes in. That's got to be a bit unnerving for planning into the first quarter, the second quarter of 2023. What are you hearing from agencies and groups about that planning for the future?
Well, unnerving is a great term to use, actually, because along with the disruption that inflation brings to Canadian families from a revenue perspective, it puts continued pressure on the demand side. More people continue to come to charities and nonprofits for services. So it's a really tough spot for organizations who want to be able to deliver for their communities. They're dealing with surging demand, and at the same time, they're also facing decreased revenue supplies.
What, in your experience, happens when, say, we've seen the unprecedented pressure on food banks, and not just in Nova Scotia, but right across this country, and they'll tell you that, again, as you point out, this is the time of the year that they get a lot of help, support. But when demand increases and the likelihood of a charitable return from people who have either been helped in the past or perhaps have seen the value in the work they do, are some charities doing better than others in this whole scenario?
Well, I don't know if I would use the term better. Are there some who are likely more visible and are therefore starting to receive additional resources? And food banks are a great example. I think there has been this demonstrated need, and we live in a pretty generous nation. Canadians respond. Corporations, individuals, foundations, and even the government. And so what we are seeing is that in certain areas where there's a bit more visibility or attention to those causes, they are attracting some resources. That doesn't mean, though, that the attraction of those new resources will allow them to keep pace with that demand. But it also means that there's other causes who aren't faring as well because they're not quite as visible as some. So it's a tough time across the board, I have to say.
Is this a one-two punch? We all saw what the pandemic did to our ability to get out and about, and I know Salvation Army, for a specific example, had to adjust the way that they collected funds. The Kettle campaign had moved to a virtual or online scenario. Is that the wave of the future, that organizations have to become more creative, think outside of the box if they're going to be able to continue doing the work?
Absolutely, and I think we've seen that innovation kind of mindset taking hold in the sector since the start of the pandemic. And it's not just about fundraising. We've seen organizations who are fundamentally reinventing the way they deliver services using digital technology more than ever before. But I will say that one of the challenges with this for charities and nonprofits has been a societal aversion to wanting to fund what they might call cost of administration or cost of overhead. The language I like to use is organizational health, resilience, and preparedness. So if we think about it as a tree, we need a strong root system and a strong trunk, that core infrastructure of technology, people to be able to deliver the programmatic branches for when a pandemic storm, an inflationary storm, the next climate emergency storm comes along. And so I'm hoping that as people are having connection and contact points with charities and nonprofits, that they're seeing the need to be able to allow those organizations to direct those dollars as they see fit so that the services are there in the future.
But I think it's fair to say that you want to make sure that the money's being used effectively or efficiently to reach as many people as possible.
Oh, completely. I mean, and I think it's a misnomer to think of impact and overhead as independent ideas. They are linked. Absolutely, people should be thinking about, are the dollars I'm donating making a difference? But they might need a computer to do that. And so these are complementary concepts.
One of the other items noted in this survey was that the numbers of people volunteering is declining. I've been a volunteer for years, and the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs just this week released a report saying that they've seen a substantial drop in the number of folks who are volunteering in that way in community, down from 160,000 down to 130,000. 90,000 of those are volunteer firefighters across this country. So what is the volunteer charitable sector doing to address that challenge right now?
Yeah, it's actually one of the greatest challenges the sector is facing, because for an organization or a sector actually that doesn't charge for its services, one of the reasons that they've been able to deliver so many is because of volunteers. And we have seen through the pandemic that volunteers have not been returning in the same way or in the same numbers that they had pre-pandemic. And so again, organizations are needing to be creative. They're trying to find new ways of engaging people. And it might be things that sometimes you don't even think of as volunteer opportunities. Most organizations don't have directors of human resources. There's lots of companies who an HR person could volunteer their talent, or this need to take services online for organizations who haven't got directors of IT. There's many folks that have real skills and talent that might be able to contribute in ways that they hadn't necessarily thought of it before.
I heard someone sum it up this way: time, talent, or treasure. If you have any of those to give, and I know that it's a really kind of concise way to say it, but it does come down to, if I don't have the money, and that's what the survey is saying, that fewer dollars are going to find their way to these charitable organizations. There are other ways that you can contribute.
Yeah, there absolutely are. And I think what we have really witnessed through both the pandemic and now this period of prolonged inflation is really a creative and kind of innovative approach by sector organizations. And that's in everything they do, from the delivery of services to the way they communicate with each other to engaging volunteers. And I think it's one of the reasons that communities are still seeing these services available to them.
How did you find yourself in this role, Bruce?
Well, I've actually been in the charitable and nonprofit sector almost all of my career, through sport, and most recently, I was the national CEO for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so have really had the great fortune of working for organizations whose mission is to make our communities better. I consider it a real privilege and honor to play a part in that role.
I see a shift, and by that I mean, I don't know if you know Nick Jennery with Feed Nova Scotia, but he has not shied away from making statements that might have been considered too political not that long ago, by suggesting that if it's not sustainable, you need to reach out to your elected representatives, engage with the people who have the authority and control, or perhaps the ability to put programming in place to help people who, for the most part, are being supported on the backs of the volunteers and the organizations that you represent.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as a sector, we need to be effective advocates for the people and communities that we serve. And we also need to make sure that people understand, and government officials understand, we're an important part of the economy. I mean, charities and nonprofits contribute about 8.5% to Canada's GDP. 2.4 million Canadians are employed by charities and nonprofits across the country. And we've actually got a solution on the table right now with the federal government to talk about a way to invest more in the organizational health of charities and nonprofits without costing the taxpayers any more money by simply redoing the formula through which grants and contributions are received. So I think it is important that elected officials hear about the importance of these kinds of organizations and the services they provide, and are encouraged to act to make sure that they're there in the future.
In the advertising world, they'll tell you we need a call to action. So where's the call to action, Bruce?
The call to action right now is you can go to Imagine Canada's website. We've got a campaign right now where in about 30 seconds, you can send 5 letters to your local MP, to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of Finance, encourage them to change this funding formula. Again, it doesn't cost the taxpayers any more money, but what it does is it allows organizations to invest in those things that will allow them to be here through this storm and future storms to come.
Good way to put it. Volunteers are working hard enough to provide and execute the services that they're delivering, making it harder through red tape or perhaps bureaucratic wrangling. That sounds like you're just adding more trouble to people who are trying to help.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one great thing is that we live in an incredibly generous nation, and I know that people and their families are hurting because of rising costs today. And we saw in this survey, 1 in 10 turning to charities in this past year. That's a higher number than we've seen in the past. And so we live in this generous nation, and hopefully together we'll make sure that that people have the access to the services that they need.
And one of the most impressive things about this country that I've found, and I've lived and worked across Canada, is that every single community says the same thing. We are really close-knit and we really support each other. And they sometimes think that they're the only ones, but there's a community of communities doing this right across this nation, which is a testament to the work that so many folks are offering to do for free to help others in need. And thanks for that.
Well, our pleasure, and thanks to you for bringing this message to your listeners so that they can support the communities in which they live, work, and play.
Bruce McDonald, Imagine Canada. Happy holidays.
Same to you. Thanks very much.